Volunteer.
There we go.
Good morning, everyone. Borja, welcome to the 1st of March meeting of Powys County Council Governance and Audit Committee, and happy St David's Day. I'll move us through to apologies. Kath, if I miss any of the apologies, could you please correct me? But the apologies I have are from Councillor William, who is otherwise engaged with the Powys Police Authority, and from Ian Halstead. But in Ian's stead, we will be having Dave Hill, the Chief Executive of SWAP, in to support this meeting. I can see Clive's hand up. Clive, do you have any additions to apologies?
Chair, and just apologies that I have a meeting with the health board at 10:30, so I'll be leaving at 10:30, but I will rejoin as soon as I can. And apologies to members for that.
Thank you very much, Clive. Thanks very much. But other than Councillor William and Ian, I don't have any other members or regular attendees who are absent. Kath?
Yes, I was just going to add apologies. We've got apologies from Lynette Lovell, Gemma Gabriel, James Chappell, Kevin Price and Rupert Bamberger and Ian Halstead from SWAP.
Yeah. Thanks. Thank you very much. Are there any disclosures of interest that members wish to make or need to make in connection with today's agenda? I will assume, as no one's put their hand up and no one has called out, that there are no disclosures of interest to be made in connection with this agenda. Before we move into agenda item 3, the minutes and the action log, can I just thank all of the officers for their contributions and their papers, and remind officers that committee members have read the papers and to please focus your opening remarks in on the key points you wish to make and what you want from the committee. There's absolutely no need to go through your papers in detail whatsoever. And if members could keep their questions concise and focused, and endeavour not to repeat points that colleagues have already made, that will hopefully help us manage the agenda in an effective way. Before I move us properly on to agenda item 3, minutes and action log, Kath, I've just had a text from John Brottingham to say that he can't get in.
Just forwarded him another invite.
Yeah, right, okay. So if we're endeavouring to get John in, and I understand that Jane's just had to step out momentarily, but that she will come back.
Gareth Radcliffe is texting to say he can't get in either.
Oh,
he's in the meeting now.
Oh, okay, fine.
Yeah.
Hi, in as well.
Hi.
Sorry, nightmare.
Yeah, nightmare with the technology this morning. It's been really not one of our best days in terms of accessing the technology. So I'll move us on, colleagues, to agenda item 3, which is minutes and action log. I will ask members for any points of clarification, correction, or matters arising. I can see that there's a hand up from Councillor Peat. Councillor Peat, would you like to address your points in connection with the minute, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. 2 points, if I may. Just a clarification point on, in my packets, page 26 on the minutes, that mentions under the issue around towns establishing partnerships. It just needs to be specific that it's in relation to the new town partnership, because as far as I know, that's the only town partnership in Powys or indeed in Wales at the moment. So it's just that clarification, Chair. And then the other point I just wanted to raise was in relation to the Red Dragon project. I accept it's important that we get things right and we take time to look at things, but I just wanted to express my sort of disappointment and indeed dissatisfaction that despite what the minutes stated, is yet again the audit report has been delayed, and I thought it could have been very useful today, as it could have fed into the item we have on procurement and contracts. The matter is sort of very important, not only to me, but several of my constituents who've been impacted by the areas of the concern highlighted, primarily the absence of the project bank account and performance bond. So I would just strongly request that there's no more delays and the report does come to this next meeting on the 18th of April, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pete, and I share your disappointment, and I agree that it is really, really important that when we consider this this report, that we do have assurance through a detailed action plan of the council's response. I think what is regrettable is that when we previously asked for this report to be put on agendas, we weren't advised that it wouldn't be ready, which has been a matter of some frustration. However, I'm just going to look to Nina for assurance around the 18th of April date, because I really don't want to put on the minutes again that it's definitely going to come to the 18th of April. So Nina, could you just give us assurance as to when the report is going to come? Because I don't really want any more false starts.
No, thank you, Chair, and I absolutely appreciate the frustration that Councillor Pete and yourself have expressed this morning over the fact that this report isn't here with you today. So I do apologise that that is the case, but I can assure you that you will have the copy of the report, the final report, and the action plan that is currently being worked on at the moment with regards to the Red Dragon. So I can give you that assurance that you will have that in good time. Thank you, Chair, and apologies again that it's not here today.
Okay, on the 18th of April, Nina?
Yes.
Yes, right, okay. Thank you very much. And Kath, I'm assuming we will correct the minute as requested by Councillor Pete in respect of Newtown Partnership. That's quite straightforward, that one, isn't it?
Yes, not a problem there, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do any other members or any officers have any points of correction, clarification or matters arising? I can see Councillor David has come in. Welcome, Councillor David.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Just a minor point on page 19 of the minutes. There's a comment included there. It's attributed to me, but I'm almost certain it was the Cabinet Member for Learning that actually made the point regarding warning notices. I'm quite comfortable with the statement. It is something I might have said, but purely for accuracy, I'm almost certain it was the Cabinet Member for Learning who was present at the meeting.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Kath, could you please just check that out, please, and make any amendments that to reflect the accuracy as pointed out by Councillor David?
Yes, not a problem at all, Chair.
Thank you very much. I can see Emma, Chief Executive, would like to join us.
Thank you very much, Chair. My intention is to observe this one, if I may, but I think I need to manage some expectations around reporting. We received the Red Dragon report from our internal auditors on the 14th of February. In order to meet the requirements for this agenda, it would have meant 1 week for staff to check factual accuracies and provide a robust response. I don't think that's insufficient time, so I think we just need to manage a little bit of expectations with this committee. We will absolutely respond to the reports, but let's give people the time to do it properly. So completely endorse the comments that the Director has made earlier. Thank you.
Thanks, Emma. That's incredibly helpful and absolutely understood and respected. I think where the committee wasn't aware of those dates, and at a previous 2 meetings when the committee has said, can the report come? No one advised us at that point, no, it can't, because we're not going to receive it until February. Had that point been made, the committee's expectations would have been managed, and we would have known that it would have been unavailable until April, which would have been fine. But no one said it's not going to come. Therefore, we were kind of anticipating, which is unhelpful in terms of committee management, though I completely respect the due process that needs to be gone through in internal governance, but we weren't aware of those times. So I guess to help everyone, to help the committee and to help officers, it would be helpful to have those timetables made clearer at the time. And then it would manage everyone's expectations. But thank you very much for your support and your intervention. If there are no further comments or observations on the minute, I'll move the committee on to Audit Wales items, and item number 4, the work programme and the timetable for the work programme from Audit Wales colleagues.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Good morning, members. Bore da. This is just a brief update of our quarterly report, which goes to Audit Committee every quarter. Just to say, the links to reports are there where they're available on the website. Where they're not, you'll expect to see those when the reports are out on the next update. But all our reports are generally published there. Just in terms of the annual audit summary, so we'll produce in a similar one to last year this year, so that should be on the next update. Accounts work for 22-23 is complete, and there's some certification of grants work still ongoing. Teachers' pension work is complete, as is housing benefit, and the rest of the work is still ongoing. In terms of 22-23 performance audit work, so you'll see our digital thematic review is now complete, which was presented to GAC in January. And the one outstanding there is unscheduled care, which should be finalised very soon, and the performance information report as well. In terms of our 23-24 work, so we're doing ongoing assurance and risk assessment work. We've recently had a workshop with your corporate management team on that, so really welcome updated information on that, because that's ongoing throughout the year. Upcoming work, we've got 2 thematic reviews taking place, one on commissioning arrangements, one on financial sustainability. That's happening across all 22 councils. So obviously the financial sustainability work is a priority for us, just given the current pressures councils are under. So we'll be looking to report that one as soon as we can, sometime in the summer. And you'll be aware of the corporate governance review that's been agreed to take place at the council, and our scrutiny follow-up work will take place alongside this. There's just some other information on local government studies. Just like to draw your attention to the recent one on brownfield regeneration, and you'll see there's a forthcoming homelessness review, which will be of interest too. There's a selection of other national and regulator reports. Just like to point out on the Joint Inspectorate review, I believe that is now, the Child Protection review, I believe that's now available, and that can be accessed on the Care Inspectorate Wales website. So just to update you on that one. And there's just a selection of our good practice events, which you can access from the website. And I'll stop there, because I think that's enough of an update from us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Does anyone have any questions, please? No. I've got a couple just on dates and stuff. My first questions was on the page 30 of the big pack and page 2 of 14 of your report. The capital programme management. The column which says Audit Wales will not undertake any work and we're currently exploring options, it just felt quite imprecise to me.
Yeah, so this was originally on our 22-23 work programme. And I believe this was due to take place across all councils. This has happened in some. I think we're just keeping it there because that at some point we will be looking at capital management. I suppose it's probably not a priority for us at the moment, but we'd just like to keep it there because the intention is to carry that out across all councils at some stage. So I will get an update on that for you, Chair, but I believe that's it's still in there, but there's no plans to undertake that work immediately at this stage.
Right.
And yeah,
okay.
sorry, I can't give you a further update on that at the moment, but I will find out for you.
No, thanks very much, because this committee's got a capital working group, so there, there's potential read across if the work were done, but we'll wait obviously. The other one was just have you on the corporate governance review, have you got any sense of your timings there?
So that is currently, the work's just being scoped at the moment. So until we've come up with project plan for that, and obviously we'll be sharing a project brief with you. We'll probably have more of an idea on timings when we publish the formal annual audit plan. So obviously that will be shared with yourselves. All the sort of specific dates will be on that audit plan. So yeah, we should have more precise timings on that very shortly.
Oh, that's really helpful. And my final question was on the audit committee good practice events that are scheduled to be held in spring 2024. You may not be able to give us any more detail now, but it would be helpful for members to be made aware of those dates as early as possible so that we can get them into diaries, because I know that colleagues would be very interested in that.
Sure. Just to say, I have raised this because we had a similar inquiry from another committee. So I believe that event is taking place in May. Again, it's just being finalised. So I think details are being shared on that very shortly.
Great.
I think I can say it'll probably be a face-to-face event, and it's looking to be held in Cardiff. So yeah, that will be sometime in May. I think the date is just being finalised. So we'll share that as soon as possible.
Excellent, thank you very much. I can see Gareth Hall, you want to come in, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. You mentioned the capital work programme, that working group that I chair. It's some time off from what Matt said about a specific review of the management of the capital programme in Powys. But Matt, you mentioned, and you've already done some work with other local authorities. If there was any good practice coming out of those reports, I would like to see that disseminated sooner rather than later, because there's a lot of issues in the post-COVID era being that need to be best practice needs to be out there, because councils are under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, of course. And I know we've done one or two reports on quite big programs at other councils, which would be happy to share. Whether there's much good practice in there, I believe there will be some, so that will usually form a part of reports. And I know there's one or two pieces of ongoing work in other councils which I think haven't been reported at this stage, but of course where I can sort of compile what we do have and share that with the chair, just so you're cited with that. But yeah, absolutely, you could be happy to share that.
Yeah, thank you very much. That'd be really helpful. Thank you. Any further questions for Matt? No. Well, thank you very much for your report, and we'll hope to see you at our next meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I'll move us on to the SWAP internal audit items, and welcome Dave Hill, Chief Executive of SWAP, who's here covering Ian Halstead's absence today. We've got three items under SWAP today. We've got the internal audit quarterly update at item 5. 6 is the planning process document, and 7 is a specific audit on supplementary payments. So I'll hand over to you, Dave, to take us through those items. Perhaps if we could pause at each item and allow members to ask questions, and I think item 6 probably needs approval, and so we should pause and do that.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this relatively short and keep to the headlines. So I thought it was just worth reminding that internal audit coverage is linked to corporate risks, sector risks, corporate goals, and the themes from the healthy organisation. And it's really important that our work is focused on those key areas. And it also allows you as members of this committee to question where there are gaps in coverage. So just to note, 82% of our opinion work confirmed the internal control environment as effective. During our course of work since previously reporting this committee, there are no significant risks that require the attention of this committee. But pleasing to note, at the time this report was put together, there were 87 agreed management actions awaiting remediation. As of today, that number is down to 57. So that's really good news and really good to report that, actually. Just as a as a sideline to this week we had an extremely positive meeting with the internal audit working group, where we demonstrated our dynamic dashboards. So these have been designed to allow full transparency of the work of internal audit. More so, as audit committee members, you can be assured that we're auditing the right things at the right time and are comfortable that agreed management actions are being implemented. So further to that, we've agreed that all members of this committee will have access to those dashboards, and on Monday, so it's not a surprise to any of you, you'll receive an email with instructions to give you that access. That's probably enough for me, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on this particular item.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much, Dave. And before I open the floor to questions, I can certainly vouch for the run through that we had of the dashboard earlier this week. It strikes me as an incredibly powerful tool for committee members and for heads of service and officers. So anyone who wasn't able to join us earlier in the week, I would really encourage you to watch the recording of the tool and call out if you want any additional support to enable you to get the most out of it. I think before I open the floor, I'm just recalling Dave and Councillor Chris some of the comments made at the working group meeting earlier in the week, where Governance and Audit Committee members are going to be given full access to this dashboard. And in accessing it, we did have a bit of a conversation prompted by SWAP colleagues and by Councillor Chris that Governance and Audit Committees in using the tool need to be mindful of their role as Governance and Audit Committee members and resist the temptation to start dabbling in operational management and asking questions of an operational nature. There will be a lot of information in there, but we're receiving that information and full access to the dashboard with a very specific Governance and Audit Committee remit in mind. So I think it's worth bearing that in mind as we go forward and resisting the temptation to be drawn into to matters that aren't within that scope. But I'll stop there and I'll just ask members if there are any questions for Dave on the quarterly update. No, I'll move you on there for Dave to item 6, the planning process document. It might be worth just bearing in mind, colleagues, as well, that we all received a questionnaire from Kevin asking us on our priorities for audit planning going forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This is worth just spending a couple of minutes on, because this is quite a change to what the Audit Committee's been used to in terms of receipt of an annual audit plan. What we've agreed with the Chair of the Committee is that we will now just annually reflect on our audit planning process, so you can see exactly what we are, how we're arriving at our audit plan and how we're arriving at our audit coverage. So the rolling audit plan is a dynamic plan rather than the annual audit plan, which, even though it can flex, it does tend to be much more structured and much more, it stays still. Mostly it sets as an annual plan, sets as a target, and the audit team tend to try and fill that audit plan rather than responding to the changing risk landscape, which is really changing quite dynamically as we speak each day in the world of the public sector with everything that's going on. So the rolling audit plan is now effective at all of SWAT partners. And just in terms of the audit industry, we've had multiple companies from many different sectors looking to adopt this particular approach. So why the rolling audit plan? I think it's, as I said, it's reflective of the dynamic and evolving nature of the public sector. The plan has to allow us to flex and audit things that are relevant to Powers Council at the relevant time, rather than just going through this big list of audits that we arrived at, sometimes 15 months earlier. So that's the reason for the rolling plan. So it allows us flexibility. It also allows us to have a continuous risk assessment rather than an annual risk assessment, which has previously been done. It also really engages stakeholders. So the rolling plan facilitates more regular communication about audit coverage, and certainly the dynamic dashboards we talked about, which you'll have access to, will give you that up-to-date view on a daily basis, or even an hourly basis if you wish, but I'm sure you've got other things to do. And also, unlike annual plans, it's going to be a forward-looking focus. So, quite often annual plans become outdated as soon as they're developed. So rolling plans are continuously updated, ensuring they remain forward-looking. I think that's probably all I need to say. I'm really thankful to the chair and Jane, Section 151, now corporate director, for allowing us to move forward. And I think you'll see that this approach will be adopted sector-wide within probably the next 24, 36 months. But I'll leave it there, Chair.
Thanks very much, Dave. Thank you. Any questions for Dave on item 6? Are we content to approve this as our planning approach going forward, and it is now in line with our remit, which we, in terms of reference, which were amended. John. John, are you on mute?
Sorry about that. I was trying to vote.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Right. Okay.
I'll second if I may.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, I think yeah. Okay. So we are approving this approach. I can see the hands. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and thank you, Dave. And pass our thanks to Ian for the work he did in preparation for this. Supplementary payments, Dave, agenda item 7.
Yeah, brief. I believe this report's been asked to come back to the audit committee, and I know that John has some questions, but I believe he sent to Jane. I believe management are considering those at the moment. So I believe there'll be focus will be shifted on this report to an internal audit working group to allow a little bit more scrutiny. But again, I'll leave it there, Chair. That's just an introduction as I understand where we are as of today.
Thank you very much. John, would you like to just remind us of the background to this report and your concerns which generated it, and raise any issues?
Yes, indeed. My concerns were raised looking at page 96 of the accounts, which spoke of supplementary payments being made, costing 1.47 million a year, with future commitments adding up to another some 22 million. I asked that we had a look at this scheme to make sure it was still robust and fit for purpose. And the document that came back answered many of the questions, but left some gaps. And that's the result. That's why I added another, I think, 10 questions, which I'd like to see. I think we need time to digest the response to those questions rather than try to deal with it in the committee now. So I thought it'd probably be a good idea to put it to the internal audit working group, where we can discuss it at some length and give ourselves a lot more assurance on this one.
Thanks very much, John. That does sound like a sensible recommendation, but I'd like to just bring Jane in before we sort of determine that that's the best way forward. Jane.
Yes, I agree. I can give you some assurance that in terms of the entry, it is appropriate, and we can give full explanations as to that. You'll recall, just for a little bit more information, I think it's important to note that when people are made redundant from the organisation, there is clear policies in place with regards to how that happens and what is assessed and so on as a result of that. There is a slight difference between the local government pension scheme and the teachers' pension scheme, and this entry actually relates to the teachers' pension scheme, where for the local government scheme, any pension costs attributable to releasing people early in line with the policy, those are capitalised when they happen. But in terms of teachers, those costs are met on an ongoing monthly basis, and hence this budget is available to meet those costs as those teachers are released. But I think it's absolutely appropriate that the detail, particularly the questions that John has raised, is discussed at that working group. Doesn't tie this committee up in too much detail, but John will then be able to feed back with the level of assurance that the committee is seeking.
Thank you. Can I just add, Chair, that I'll circulate the questions I've posed to the other members of the committee.
Well, thank you very much, Dave, John and Jane. That sounds like the best way forward to remit the detailed conversation to be had at the internal audit working group of this committee. So we'll take it forward on that basis with Kath's support. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll move us on to agenda item 8, the strategic risk management Q3 report. I'm assuming that Bets is somewhere with us. I'm not seeing you, Bets.
If she's not, Chair, I can pick it up.
Are you happy? Are you happy that we move forward, Jane? Okay,
Yeah.
Jane. Thank you very much, and thank you to Councillor David as well for this report. Jane, if you would just like to very briefly introduce it, and then we'll open the floor to questions from members.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this is the Strategic Risk Register report that Cabinet receive on a quarterly basis, and this one relates to Q3. The report sets out the information that Cabinet receive in terms of reviewing the risks across the organisation, any escalations, and any recommendations that go to Cabinet. And I think for this committee, this gives you the information regularly so that you can fulfil your role in terms of getting assurance around that risk management process and everything from the committee. So I'll assume everybody's read the detail of the report, Chair, and leave it there for questions.
Thank you very much, Jane. I would agree. I think this is a particularly helpful report, and it does give us a high degree of assurance that the Cabinet and the corporate leadership team are diligently examining the risk profile of the authority. I can see Councillor Peat wants to come in. Councillor Peat.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and yeah, thanks for the update as well, Jane. It was just a quick question. I think it's on page 86 of the pack, paragraph 3.5. There's some movements up and down around a couple of risks, and one that was just intriguing me, I think, is the procurement one, 008, which has gone down, and I guess just still in the current environment for me, I was just intrigued as to why that one's gone down. So I didn't know, perhaps, I know there's lots of discussions and lots of other reports, and we do see lots of reports, but I didn't perhaps know, if you could just give us a little brief reason why that one's gone down, but then perhaps in future whether we could just add a sentence or two into this report just to give us the assurance that we understand why the risk is moved. And then, if I may, Chair, I was just also second one. I was just after a bit of clarification around the date of the report, because I note the date is the 19th of March, which is 3 weeks into the future, and a lot could happen. So does it subsequently get updates if necessary before it goes to Cabinet? Thank you.
So I come in, Chair.
Thanks, Pete.
So in terms of the report, it's a quarterly report. Cabinet receives the report quarterly. This doesn't get updated. This is at that snapshot at the end of Q3. So Cabinet obviously will receive that Q4 report. In terms of the procurement risk, That is something we monitor routinely, and we would reflect the current level of risk at this point, at this particular quarter, in terms of the score. Now, you'll all recall that at the start of the Ukraine war, we saw quite an impact on supply chain costs and supply chain availability. And at that point in time, the risk we felt was higher for the organisation. Some of that risk, there is always a risk in terms of global events. None of us know what might happen tomorrow to impact on this risk. But as it currently stood when we were assessing it again at Q3, the level of risk, and there was a bit more stability in the supply chain impacting specifically on the council, and some of those costs, particularly energy costs and so on, have stabilised at the moment. So we understand where we are, and we've got those accommodated within the budget plan. So I think the slight reduction in the score was a reflection of that. I can see Wayne is here as well. Wayne is the owner of this particular risk, so Wayne may want to add a little more than I already have, but you will see these scores go up and down based on exactly where we are at any point in time, and that is the appropriate way to manage these types of risks. So I'll leave it there, Chair, and see if Wayne wants to add anything.
Thanks very much, Jane. Wayne, come in.
Yes, please. Sorry. Yes, as Jane said, there's a number of market conditions which have changed, but also part of the additional reason for some of the reduction in that is we form part of a Welsh market expert intelligence group. So actually, some of our awareness is actually improved as well as a result of being part of that group. So we've got multiple bodies sort of scanning the environment in terms of impact. There are some concerns around sort of Suez Canal and that sort of thing, and the additional timelines that's impacting on some materials, but we're not necessarily seeing it to a great extent in our procurement. There's also another strand of intelligence that we secure via the Cabinet Office as well. So we have bi-weekly reports from the Cabinet Office. Not all of it is relevant to the supplies and the services that we source as an organisation, but there's helpful intelligence there which helps us have greater insight and therefore can respond to changes if they arise. But as Jane said, there's a number of factors which are stabilised, not least particularly in terms of the fuel and energy stabilisation, and from what we saw, a couple of years ago now with the start of the Ukraine conflict.
Thank you very much, Wayne. Pete, does that deal with your question?
Yeah, that does. Thank you, Jane and Wayne. Gives me the assurance I was looking for. And so I just wondered though about my question regarding perhaps having a sentence in future, so as we could actually see that in the report. Something to just tell us why.
So in the covering paper.
Yeah, so say like in 3.5 where it says like they've moved up and down, is if there could just be a sentence, so almost summarising to a degree what Wayne and Jane have just said, so as I've got assurance as to why that's changed.
Is that something that could be done? So it's not on the pro forma, it's just on the cover paper. Yeah.
I think that's fair, because I think the database and the volume of information in the database is quite extensive, but of course the way you're actually seeing a change in that score, which are more limited, I think that would be fine to add something to this report to give a bit more context. So yes, I'm happy to take that on board.
And Councillor David, I can see wants to come in.
Yeah, I was just wondering, Jane, whether it could be appropriate just to include a sentence in the review summary within the document, because I've just been checking the review date on this, and to a credit to all concerned, the majority, all actually apart from one, were reviewed in January, late January in many cases, so they're pretty up to date. But with the review summary around the last review, perhaps we could put a sentence in there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor David. Yeah, thank you. Gareth, I can see you. Gareth.
It's really an extension of what Councillor David was just saying. Against these, this is a general comment, against these risks, it's got in the final comments column that there's actions in progress. I'd like a bit more, if we could, a bit more clarity about what sort of actions and over what time period and what they'll deliver and how far they'll go to mitigate or get rid of the risk.
Thank you, Gareth. Jane, I'll bring you in and then Bets. Yeah.
I think I keep calling you Councillor Gareth, apologies. Gareth, I think in terms of the detail, as I said, there is a lot more detail behind these individual risks. To include all of that detail on these reports would make them too cumbersome by far, I think, for the reports that we share with the overall view. But the scrutiny committees, when they look at these risks in detail, do get into that level of detail and challenge the appropriate officer accordingly. So I think, you know, assured that that does happen. And when we do the deep dive risks on each of the individual risks here, we clearly pick up a lot more than you see on the face of the report. And I think that's appropriate.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Thank you very much, Jane. Bets, did you want to add, or were you going to say that?
Yeah, I took my hand down, sorry, Chair, because
That's okay.
Jane said
That's
exactly
okay.
what I was going to say. Thank you.
That's fine. Yeah, so we can be assured that the scrutiny committees go into that level of detail and are provided with the requisite level of information to enable them to do so. Thank you, Jane. Councillor Gareth.
Thank you. Sorry, just on that last comment, Jane. Just in my mind, most probably a silly question, but are we assessing are any of these that fall in between scrutiny committees or crossover too, so they get weakened? Just a little bit of understanding of gaps that may appear that could be scrutinized but actually don't fall into any of them. I think it's just a little bit of understanding around that would be helpful from your comment there. Just in my mind, it's just sort of sparked that little question in my head.
And I think, Councillor Gareth, that's exactly why you get the deep dives here through this committee on the strategic risk. So this committee has more of that overview, so it's appropriate for those particular risks to come here for that level of scrutiny.
Yeah. There's a couple of things in my head, but I don't think this is the place for it now. Asking that, I need a little bit more thought on it. I just got some things rattling around in my head that you kind of sparked regarding. Yes, that's good, but we're a different type of scrutiny committee around audit and risk. We're not the in-depth operator, so it's different between a scrutiny committee and coming here, and that's the kind of question I'm kind of getting to. Is, well, actually, that's all well and good. Yes, they come here, but we do a different type of scrutiny because it's been audit and governance. So I don't know if there's scrutiny options. I don't know. Anyone want to help me out? If they can, I understand where I'm coming from. Saw the chair nodding, so hopefully.
Well, I can see Jane's hand up. I think I know where you're going, Councillor Gareth, but I'll bring Jane in.
Yeah, I think this committee does have a slightly different role, doesn't it? It's about getting the assurance that the processes and the governance around how we manage our risk at that overarching level is appropriate. So yes, you have that role, but I think in terms of some of the more strategic risks, through the deep dives that this committee undertakes, you do have that additional scrutiny on those particular items, and that maybe, you know, finance panel would pick up on some of the more financial elements as well as part of their remit. So I hope I've got what you were saying, but perhaps the chair wants to help me out.
I don't know whether this is reflecting what's in Councillor Gareth's mind, but I think the deep dive programme is incredibly helpful because it gives this committee an additional level of assurance that about the detailed level of work that is ongoing within services and within scrutiny committees. Because I think it's worth bearing in mind that when we conduct those deep dives, I'm pretty confident that each and every one of them, the relevant cabinet member has attended, and invariably the chair of the relevant scrutiny committee as well. So from my perspective, that helps provide me with the assurance that at cabinet level and service head and at scrutiny level, that the right work is being done and the relevant conversations are being had.
Yeah,
but I'm
yeah.
not sure, Gareth,
Yeah,
if that's
I
exactly where your mind is.
It's not far from there. What I'm seeking reassurance is there any gaps of areas of services within the authority that may not fall within a scrutiny committee and
Right,
may
okay.
not come across our area?
Right,
so,
okay.
So yeah, so so for me, it's because portfolios are divided up and everything else like that. The scrutiny committees are slightly different to them,
Right.
so some of them cross over. I'm a little just wondering about, with risk, are there areas we've got that actually bridge two scrutiny committees, but actually because they're bridged two scrutiny committees, they're dealing with it, no, you're dealing with it, and then it falls between the gap.
Yeah, it falls between the cracks. Yeah,
but yeah,
right.
so
I
yeah,
understand now.
yeah.
So I think so as not to prolong this here, what I think I'll do is I'll ask Jane and Bets just to give that a bit of thought, and perhaps just to think about that in terms of assurance that that nothing is falling between the cracks because of the structure of departmental responsibilities. From my perspective, I'm going to say that I strongly suspect that the Chief Executive's corporate leadership team has got that one covered, and I'll be very surprised to be told that they don't. But I'll just ask for someone to sort of at the next meeting to go, yeah, of course we've got that one covered. But that's, from my perspective, I'm pretty confident that's where those cross-cutting conversations will be being had. Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Apologies if I missed this because I had to dip out to take a call. I'm just wondering, has anybody raised the on the quarter during the following risks have changed the probability? I just wanted to ask about the reduction to just a 6 for the global chain issues. I'm not sure whether that's been discussed. Did I miss that?
Yeah, yes, Councillor Graham, you missed it, and it's been discussed.
I'll catch it on the recording.
Councillor Pete raised that, and Jane and Wayne together.
Okay, that's fine.
A very wholesome answer. Yeah.
I'll catch you on the recording. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. Any further points on the strategic risk register? No. No, in which case I'll move us on to agenda item 9, which and bring Nina in on the corporate safeguarding activity report, which we received to provide us with assurance that the necessary action activity is in place to manage this potential risk. Nina.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'll just take you through just some of the highlights from the report, and then happy to take questions afterwards. The information and the report in front of you today is from the Corporate Safeguarding Board meeting, which was held on the 14th of December of last year. So I appreciate that's a few months ago now. The first thing I do have to say, on the first page of the report, it notes that this report will be going to the health and care scrutiny on the 11th of April. I just want to state that that date is incorrect, and it will actually be going to health and care scrutiny in the March. So I just wanted to have that noted. As we do at all of the Corporate Safeguarding Board meetings, we review progress against the actions on the Safeguarding Regulatory Tracker. And I just want to note that the updates were all reviewed, noting all were either blue, which means completed, or green, on track. We received a copy of the Regional Safeguarding Board's annual report and had a good discussion around that. Included within that report are some of the highlights of the work that's been happening in Powys, and I just wanted to highlight the work we've been doing on child exploitation, and the strategy that we have done has now been rolled out in other regions, and we have received awards for such work. So that was something I just wanted to bring to everybody's attention. The National Safeguarding Week was held in November, and Powys hosted the annual conference, very successful conference. And at the board, we had a really good discussion around the speakers and presentations that had taken place. And our thanks were extended to all of the staff for their hard work and commitment in putting on such a successful conference on behalf of the region. The board had a real focus in December on child performance licensing, child work permits, etc. We had an update report outlining the number of licenses and permits awarded. And we've also highlighted that there was, at that time, a spotlight on safeguarding update relating to child work permits as well, to really help raise awareness around the subject. Next steps are being progressed, included some more targeted awareness raising. And also just board noted that work is ongoing with the Royal Welsh Show to create a link and increase knowledge in advance of this year's show. So we will be having a presence and we will be working with the organisers to make sure information and applications are available to exhibitors and trade stands in advance of the show. And that's going to be an item that we're going to follow up in our future meetings as well. So to keep a track on that and that work. The board were also provided links to a recorded PowerPoint and talking head vlog, and we're asked to feedback any comments. So we've included the links to those vlogs in the report here for you as well for your information. Reports by exception were received from a number of services as usual. We had a really good discussion around the housing one because there's been an increase in the number of 16 and 17-year-olds who've become homeless and are in interim accommodation, etc. So we had a really good discussion around the reasons for this and the outcomes and the data and the changes in those patterns, etc. And we agreed as a board that we requested that data showing homelessness of Powys care experienced young people will be included in future reports as well, so we can keep a closer focus on that. We also noted the Welsh Government consultation around changes to proposals and homeless legislation that was open at the time as well. With discussion in safeguarding education, we were informed about the significant improvement in contact with elective home educated children and their families, increased to 72%. So I think that's really important to note. And we've also were advised that Powys are going to be taking part in a children missing education pilot, which will be an area that we continue to focus on moving forward as well. We also looked at fixed term exclusions and how that the numbers are continuing to rise, which does mirror the Welsh and the UK picture. So a real good discussion around fixed term exclusions, and again, an area that the board is going to continue to focus on. Mandatory safeguarding, compliance at 92.3%, which is really positive, and a special notice was given to HTR, who were showing 97%, which is absolutely excellent. A concern was noted with the school staff compliance with VOWDA SV level 1 with training. And so we were updated as a board on what work would happen and is happening at that time to improve that across the schools. So there's going to be targeted communications, etc. And so we'll be keeping an eye on that moving forward. And we were also informed that a steering group has been set up as well to provide level 3 trained staffs to support across the services. It was also just noted that the white ribbon walks were held in November as well. We were taken through adult safeguarding a report as well, and children's services. The board were updated that the joint inspection of child protection arrangements, JICPA, had been completed in October, and this is going to be one of our major items for discussion at our board in March as well. The board also noted the number of children on the child protection register was showing a downward trajectory as well, so we had a discussion around that. So that's a very brief highlight, if I may, Chair. Just to noting, the board had a copy of the Director of Social Services annual report in English and Welsh, and a copy of the Safeguarding quarterly newsletter as well for information. And our next meeting will be held on the 14th of March. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, I was on mute, everybody. Thank you very much, Nina. And I can see Councillor Chris would like to come in.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Nina. As you reflected, the report is very positive and has a lot of good stuff in it, so it's welcomed. Let me just come on to some specifics, if I may, because there's a couple of questions I have on there, and these are on page 124 of the report. There is a section which is entitled Adult Social Care Safeguarding Performance, And there is one statement in there that I just want to get some assurance around, and it's the one that begins with the board were informed of investigations. It uses the word in that second line of that about care home staff, maybe due to gaps in referrals knowledge. I just wondered whether you could just unpack that a little bit further for us, to just ensure that training is actually provided to those referrers, and if not, what supervision and what readdress is going on there, and do we have training records for that particular staff group?
Thank you very much, Councillor Chris, and thank you for your question. There was a general discussion at the board about referrals into safeguarding, etc. And I recall we had a couple of questions from board members around referrals, were they actual safeguarding referrals? And in some cases they weren't. So that was where the comment was made, I think, about the training, etc., or awareness raising. Of course, they wouldn't always be members of staff that would be making referrals, etc. So it's not always possible to, access training records of who's making those referrals. So I think rereading the minutes, I think it was more of a general discussion on referrals into the safeguarding. And that, but I've just got a little bit of extra information. Sorry, just let me move screen so I can open it up. Just to give you assurance that I don't think there was anything out of the ordinary that was being reflected in terms of care homes safeguarding referrals. So I just want to make that clear to the board here today. There wasn't a concern being raised. And just and if and when concerns are raised around care homes, and obviously we have a very robust system in place for overseeing that. There's a joint information monitoring panel, for example, which is held with partners. So CIW, Health Board, Commissioning, social work teams, etc., to share information, look at trends, and where safeguarding referrals have made. So we've got that kind of governance behind it. And they decide what actions taken moving forward as well. And if concerns are raised, when we very much work with providers to put in place action plans moving forward. So I think the minutes are kind of reflecting that we had a wider discussion around that whole area. But there wasn't a specific training for like Powys County Council staff referred to, from what I can recall, Councillor Chris. But I will take away an action to pick that up with the staff from those service areas at the next corporate safeguarding board, just to make sure that we really clarify that and clear that up, if that's okay as well.
I think that would be helpful, because when I read it, it felt a little bit passive, and it felt that, may, well, we doubt. And to me, I think it just needed to be more expansive, that it was more of a general discussion, and these were some of the topic areas coming up, because it's for the perception of the public may just give some concern there if it's put in those terms, in my view. Now, the next question I have on the same is under the children's element to it, and again, lots of positive on there, and I look forward to seeing the joint report coming through to the Health Committee, which I sit on. But there's the final paragraph in there, it talks about a discussion around changes in performances, and particularly around safeguarding assessments. One of the things that is mentioned on here is about the WIXA system, which is one of my things I've come across in the past, and I've raised a number of questions about it. But we talk about downtime and slowness of that particular system. Now, that's on our risk register under ASC 0064. And we were going to be an early potential early pilot of a replacement system on that. Can you just give me the assurances that none of this downtime has caused any challenges or issues regarding safety of children, but also of any of our staff in relation to any professional accountability, because they've not been able to access into that system and delivered appropriate care or taken appropriate action.
Thank you, Councillor Chris. There was a really big discussion around this at the board as well, and I hope that you could see that that was reflected in the minutes. You know, one of the things that the board drilled down to is that there had been an impact on the completion of assessments within timescales, and that was noted as it had been impacted by WCCIS downtime and slowness, etc. In terms of assurance that, you know, the reason that this is a risk, and it is a very significant risk, is because any downtime or slowness on this system does have an impact. And, you know, if staff aren't able to access the live information, etc., when they need to, if they're not able to input data and information onto a live system because it's down for whatever reason, then that does have a risk. And that's why, you know, it's reflected on the risk register in the way that it is. In terms of, you've kind of referenced there the fact that Powys was under consideration to be an early adopter of a new system. Well, since I'll just briefly update you, if I may, Chair, because things have changed in the last couple of weeks. Since that update was written for Q3 risk, at that point in time, we, along with other local authorities and health boards in Wales, were looking to be going with a system on the national team, etc. Within the last couple of weeks, the advice has changed from the national team, who are now advising a different procurement route for that new system. So what I'm working closely with colleagues in IT at the moment to put together a new report. And so within the next couple of weeks, I will be able to update health and care scrutiny and yourselves in terms of that. So I just wanted to give you just the kind of flag here today that things have changed in the last couple of weeks in terms of that and progress with that. But just to give you that assurance that this remains an absolute priority. We are working across the service already on data cleansing, for example. Significant amount of that data cleansing has already taken place. So we are in a good position to be looking to move to a new system within the timescales that have been outlined previously, but the route to doing that might be slightly changing, and I will update you on that as soon as I'm able to. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Chris, for your questions, and thanks, Nina, for your very full answers. They're very much appreciated. Anything else on this item 9? If not, I'll move us to agenda item 10, which is risk assurance, procurement and contracts. And this item, which Wayne's going to lead us through, has its origins in the committee's questions about and seeking assurance on project bank accounts. Wayne.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. Just for the committee's information, there were, Chair, you asked a number of questions in relation to the presentation. So I've added some additional information into some slides, and therefore I'll present that my slides as opposed to the agenda, and obviously that can be subsequently updated. Can I just check that people are seeing the screen?
Yeah,
right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
So, just in terms of background, members of the committee will recall that actually in a previous meeting, and we've spoken about the Red Dragon, there were two sort of parts to that. One was around an audit on the Red Dragon, and that will be discussed in a future meeting as referred to previously. There was also a question about was project bank accounts covered in our commercial risk register. So what I've sought to do is respond to that question within these slides, but also taking the opportunity to provide some greater clarity for members of the committee of the activities we're undertaking across commercial services, which is my team, and across the wider council. And so hopefully that provides greater assurance, like I say, and greater information for members of the committee. Just to so just in terms of a reminder, so as an organisation, we spend in the region of £250 million per annum on contracts for goods, services and works. Traditionally, like many councils and public sector entities, the traditional focus has been on a sort of tender, a re-tendering sort of cycle. But what we put in place is looking at the full commercial life cycle. So that's actually, so historically it was very much tender management, limited a focus in terms of strategic commercial strategy development and limited contract management. We've put a number of changes in place now to actually have that full life cycle approach. That ensures that actually we have the core sort of contracted services objectives are met. It also ensures that actually we're identifying and reducing supply chain risk where they arise, and also make sure actually we're exploring multiple benefits realization. So not just about the key delivery of the service, but also other wider corporate objectives around social value and net zero. So that's our approach, that holistic approach to managing the full life cycle. In terms of our contract spend profile, so as I mentioned before, last year we spent £252 million. That was slightly up on the previous year. We have at any one time, we have just below 1,000 contracts in place. So as of February, that was 968 live contracts in place. And then if we consider our profile of what our spend looks like, so we had 17 suppliers, of which our expenditure with them was in excess of £2 million per annum. That represented actually 25% of our total spend. Then if we look down to the next tier of expenditure, so any supplier above £1 million, in total, we had 57 suppliers, and that represented nearly 50% of our total spend. And then if we look at a further strand down in terms of any suppliers for which we spend in excess of 250,000, we've got 200 suppliers. Why am I showing this? This is really to ensure that actually we're dedicating our attention and our resources on those actually organisations, those contracts, those suppliers for which there's the greater impact on the organisation's performance. So making sure we have those mechanisms in place. If we consider what our spend profile looks like of that 250 million, so we've got 4 core categories of expenditure. So what first one is around constructions and work. So we're spending in the region of 23% of our contracted expenditure in that category. If we then consider in things like highways, environmental, so that's highways, waste, transport, etc., that represents about 16% of our expenditure. No surprise that actually social care is by far the greatest category of expenditure, and that represents about 42% of our spend. And then we have corporate expenditure, which is a range of different services, particularly there's things like ICT, etc. But effectively, it's anything which is not clearly categorized in the 3 above in terms of construction, highways, and social care. If we compare what our expenditure looks like so far this financial year to last year, those first 3 quarters are showing that we've actually spent 150 million, which is quite, considering it's 3 quarters or 75% through that year, it's quite a reduction on the full year effect. We will see there will be various contracts in place which actually are paid annually, or changes charges annually, etc. So those expenditure levels we expect to go down given the current climate, etc. But importantly, the profile of spend is pretty similar to what we've seen in the past in terms of where our expenditure profile looks like. So again, we can compare social care, for example. So 42% the previous year. So far this year, our expenditure is looking in the region of 43–44%. So that reflects our profile. If if I may then actually just share some of the changes and improvements that we've put in place. So we've been putting in a I joined in 22 we put a number of improvements in place. So just to recap and share some of those. So first of all, we've actually put in a monthly commercial performance and risk board that has representatives from across the council, and that board provides oversight, support and challenge to the organisation across its full life cycle. So that total expenditure of the 250 million, like I say, we review our pipeline, we review our contracts profile, and we review a number of elements in terms of improvements, which I'll go into a bit more further down. Within that risk board, we have been improving our commercial intelligence and data, and we produce a commercial dashboard which provides us with clear information of how we're performing as an organisation, and particularly where improvements could be made. That's shared with that board, that commercial board, also shared with SLT and Councillor David Thomas. And then a sort of core element of that, we put a number of measures in place for improving contract management across the organisation. So one of those is actually about identifying and managing financial risk within our supply chain. So we've put a new mechanism in place. We've actually also put in place a skills development program to make sure that we've got contract managers with the right skills in place and robustly managing our contracts. And then we've also we're just rolling out now actually a new contract management framework, which I'll talk to a bit more about in the next slide. In terms of wider improvements as well, what we've also created is a green network. So that's creating a community of expertise. So people across the organisation at various different levels who are actually both we're sharing information in relation to net zero and the opportunities, but also a lot of them are coming with a level of expertise, a level of interest, etc. So it's about upskilling and embedding net zero ambitions across the DNA of the organisation. So it's not about my team trying to sort of shoehorn different targets into it. It becomes part of the DNA. It becomes part of the concept and the thought process when we're looking at future requirements, future services. If I go down and talk a bit more about the contract management, I'm afraid I can't see anybody's hands or anything like that. So if anybody wants to stop me at any point, please do call out. So, but if I talk about our approach, in particular in terms of our improvements to contract management, so we've created, as I say, a contract management framework. So that looks at our total profile of our contracts based on value, based on various risks, and through that identifying 4 categories of contracts. So those categories are platinum, gold, silver and bronze, and the platinum contracts will ensure that we have a real high level of scrutiny and frequency in terms of reviewing those contracts and making sure that they're performing. We're working with the suppliers to address any issues that might arise, etc. And like I say, dedicating our resources into those contracts that actually hold the greatest impact for the performance of the organisation. A bronze contract would be deemed to be fairly low value, low risk, and therefore would have to undertake a bit more of a lighter touch approach to contract management. In terms of and the timetable for that, so actually we just finalised some bits and pieces. So we'll be working with service areas about rolling out that approach. If we then consider about our data, making sure we've got the clear information and intelligence to inform our priorities, then we've been improving our intelligence. We've actually, part of that, we put in place a contract management regime that looks at the financial risk of organisations, and any organisation which carries a higher than average risk, a risk level 3 or 4, then actually we work together with the service areas, with the suppliers to agree a mitigation plan on that. So actually we're minimising the risks and making sure that we seek to address and address, reduce, and eliminate those risks where they apply. So that's it in place. And then in terms of the skills development, there's 2 levels of training that we put in place. So any contracts for which we spend with a supplier in excess of £1 million a year, then the contract manager for that has to undertake a level of professional training. So we've utilised something that has been developed by the Cabinet Office and their commercial, their government commercial college. So there's free training we've been able to access, and we put that in place. And those suppliers, sorry, those contract managers, like I say, have got those skill sets now. We're also going to be introducing very shortly for the contracts that actually are of a lower value, but making sure we have the again that level of skills in place. So the first one, in terms of that detailed training there, represents about 7 to 10 hours of work by the individual in terms of undertaking that training. We're also going to put in place an awareness training for other officers who may touch contracts from time to time, and then we'll be rolling that out within this quarter. Then finally, just to provide a sort of greater assurance, my team's recently gone through a restructure, and what we've been able to do through that restructure process is actually identify a new role, which is a strategic contract management officer. So that person will effectively hold the reins to make sure that we're driving the improvement around the systems and process, the information intelligence and the skills. My team, in terms of commercial services, we don't manage the contracts. They're typically that responsibility sits with services across the organisation. But our role is to have that oversight to make sure that good contract management is in place, and us working with those service areas to support them in that development. So that's what we'll be looking forward to in terms of driving forward, going forward. Then just finally, I guess, sort of coming back to the initial question of what was asked in relation to project bank accounts. So we do have a risk register. We do have that requirement within the risk register. So we have under the risk, which is number 6. So if a supplier goes into insolvency, then leaves partially completed contracts, including building programs, etc. So what's the consequence of that? So we've got that risk control in place. There are a number of strands of activity that we put in place to manage that risk. So first one is around rigorous financial checks at the point of contract award. So we have those in place, and we've been working with finance and service areas of that. We've also got the ongoing monitoring I mentioned earlier about key suppliers, working with finance and reviewing through the lifetime of the contract their commercial financial position and the strength of that, and making that taking steps where that arises. And then we've got another, but I've highlighted here about the use of project bank accounts. So it is that risk is covered in the risk register, and what we've actually put in place is actually where a project bank account doesn't, if there's a delay to the project bank account, then actually we have mechanisms within the contract to make sure that we have clarity from those suppliers to ensure that from the prime contractors to make sure that subcontractors are being paid, and we have evidence and able to make changes and robustly manage those requirements. A number of these activities will be also included in the response to the audit. And I don't want to go into too much detail in terms of obviously the audit. That will be given sufficient time in the next meeting to go through that in more detail. But it was just to reassure that actually that risk had been identified, and is not waiting for the audit. The measures are already in place to make sure that we're not picking up on that risk that was identified.
Thanks very much, Wayne. That's incredibly helpful, comprehensive presentation. Thank you very much. I can see Councillor Pete wants to come in. Pete, floor's yours.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Wayne, for a very thorough presentation there. I'd had 2 points if I could. Just picking up on your last point around, I think it was control 006 there.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, have you considered adding in that we put a performance bond in place if we can't do a project bank account as another control?
We've yes, we do use performance bonds. A performance bond was used in the Red Dragon example as well, in fact, and obviously further details will be covered at that within the audit. So yes, I can certainly strengthen the risk register, but just to assure you that performance bonds are a mechanism that we use for contracts, and they are in use. It was in use actually in terms of the Red Dragon.
Good. Okay. Thank you, Wayne. My second one, if I may, Chair, was again, I was looking at the summary of the controls that are in place there, Wayne. And obviously, I know it's a summary and it's difficult to go into a lot of detail. But what I wanted to ask is where can we get an assurance that those controls do work and that they are effective? And I was just wondering whether or not there could be a request, and you touched on the Red Dragon, is whether we could actually cross-check those controls or actions listed there to what actually happened with the Red Dragon project, plus the findings that we might get from the internal audit report. And then perhaps, if the chair was agreeable, come back to this committee with an assessment of the effectiveness of those controls and the control framework. Thank you.
Yes, I think in terms of those, like I say, quite a significant element I think will be covered in the response to the Red Dragon. Very happy also to, through this committee, give regular updates with further details around the controls that we have in place across the commercial risk register, and hopefully that provide not just about the example that we identified within the Red Dragon, but actually about risk management across the board from a supply chain point of view.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pete, for your questions, and thank you, Wayne, for your presentation and for the answering Councillor Pete's questions in the way that you have. That's incredibly helpful, and I'm assuming we'll see you again in April when we take the audit report. And thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. That was incredibly helpful. I'll move us on, colleagues, to agenda item 11, which is our action plan on last year's self-assessment. While I try and log myself back into my other screen, I'll just pause and ask if there are any comments or questions on agenda item 11. No. I'll just take the opportunity under this agenda item to remind colleagues of our self-assessment session on the 15th of March, where we'll be looking reflecting on the past year and looking forward to the coming year and our continuous improvement journey. And I'm hoping to see as many of you there in person. Appreciate that that's not always possible, but I'll certainly be there in person for the self-assessment session in 2 weeks' time. If there are no questions or comments on item 11, I'll move us on to item 12, which is under the supplementary agenda, and it's a draft terms of reference for a whistleblowing governance review, which the committee discussed the need for at its last meeting on the 12th of January. And so I would like to just take any brief comments, just as I take comments and proposals about how we go forward with this. Can I just suggest that we don't repeat the conversation that we had in January, and that we focus on how we go forward with a review, rather than have the full discussion again. Pete, Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll taking your comments on board. I'll try to be as brief as possible. I just wanted to say I was sort of very disappointed and frustrated to sort of say for me that there is not enough depth or detail in these terms of reference. And again, for me, it doesn't go anywhere near what we discussed and agreed at our last meeting, as we've recorded in the minutes that we've just approved. It was agreed that the terms of reference would be drafted around the whistleblowing governance framework, and indeed agreed that a case study would be undertaken, which for me goes far beyond a review of policy and toolkit. I'm sure eyes will be upon us to see how we address the concerns raised around whistleblowing, and we really must be seen to be undertaking our review to the depth required. So I was going to ask that if we agree today that the terms of reference need to include the points that we had previously agreed on, then I would be happy to agree to a working group being formed and being given the power to draft and agree its own terms of reference to specifically ensure that all those points are picked up in the review that it would undertake. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much, Councillor Pete. From my perspective, I think it would be very helpful if we took our consideration of whistleblowing governance framework and our need for assurance into a task and finish working group. And Pete, if you're agreeable, I think it would be helpful if you were to chair that. I'll ask the membership for any other volunteers who would wish to be part of that working group. I certainly would, under Pete's chairmanship of the Task and Finish working group. I think it would be helpful to understand the scope of the terms of reference. I think it's going to be really, really important for everyone involved to understand the scope of our work and what is in and what is out. And we need also to be assure ourselves and assure others across the council, including scrutiny committee colleagues in the cabinet, that the work that we undertake through this working group sits very squarely within the constitutional position and the role and remit of Governance and Audit Committee. We absolutely need to be assured that the whistleblowing framework, policy, procedures, conduct, everything is fit for purpose. And we need to do that, but we need to do that within the realms and the reason of what is the purpose of Governance and Audit Committee. And I am very, very confident that we will be able to do that and contribute to the ongoing performance and improvement journey of the local authority. So unless anyone has a different view, I think we will create a task and finish working group. We'll ask Pete to chair it. We'll have terms of reference developed a little bit further that reflect the standard format of our other terms of reference documents. And we will be as specific as we can reasonably be about the scope and purpose of the group within the remit of this particular committee. So John, I did see your hand up.
Yeah, I was just trying to volunteer, that's all.
That's okay, fine, okay. I'm sure Kath will make a wee note of that, and Councillor Pete's hand's up again too.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, no, I was also going to thank you for your comments, and I'm totally in agreement with your comments there. And yes, I thank you for your trust and confidence in me to chair that, and I would be delighted to do that if others were happy for me to do so as well. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Jane, is there anything you want to add on this item? Okay, in which case we'll proceed on that basis, and thank you very much for everyone for that. I'll move us on to agenda item 13, which is our regular risk deep dive. And this one is on fraud. And I think that's for Yvette to... No, have I got that wrong? Ever so sorry.
I think Yvette may well participate. I think Craig is going to present. I'm going to present the presentation on screen to assist Craig. He's going to give us an overview then of the slides, but I'm sure Yvette will come in at any point to assist in any questions or challenge that members may have. So bear with me while I share my screen.
Right, thanks very much, Jane. Sorry for the choreography.
No, it's fine.
Slip up. Craig, sorry.
No problem, Chair.
Oh, that didn't work, did it?
Nah.
Why is it not doing it?
It's coming, Jane. Yep, you're there.
Okay. I'll just start the slideshow. Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, all. Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll take you through the presentation today. And as Jane has said, Yvette is in the meeting, who leads our counter fraud team, and will be available to deal with any specifics raised by the committee today. I think it's fair to say that the council remains committed to safeguarding public money and ensuring that residents of Powys have confidence in that the council operates in a fair and honest way. As an organisation, it is essential that we remain vigilant to the risk of fraud and corruption. The importance of promoting a culture in which fraud and corruption is unacceptable and fraud risks are fully understood remains at our fore. You can see there in front of you is the identified risk in relation to fraud. And during, you can see there the potential consequences and the mitigations. And if we just move on to the next slide then, Jane, with regards to the background. It's fair to say again that the pandemic has had significant effects on people's living costs, and the organisation's own resources, that makes it even more imperative that we all, across the organisation, are responsible to protect public money very seriously. The deep dive presentation that you have in front of you, we look to provide members with the mitigating actions that is taken forward across the organisation as we acknowledge and develop understanding of these risks. So the risk was first identified back in 2022. And as we know, with regards to the fallout of the mini budget in September 22 and the soaring inflation and high interest rates, cost of living crisis, the increased risk of fraud has heightened. And via the KIFS update back in July 2022, 11% increase in the cases of fraudulent conduct has been filed to the National Fraud Initiative database in the first 6 months of that particular calendar year. Powys specific, there has been over 120 investigations undertaken between Q1 and Q3 of the current financial year, and therefore the risk remains significant to the council. Some of our mitigating actions will be taken forward in the next few slides. The first one is regarding assessment and control. The Governance and Audit Committee is provided with quarterly updates in regards to the work, activities and performance across the organisation, along with raising significant concerns around the opportunities for fraud that we have identified and revealed in the course of the fraud and error work. As we go forward, to provide assurance, a biannual fraud intelligence report is produced and presented to the Section 151 officer. And we also identify risks and capture these via the risk register. These are monitored, updated, and are subject to monitoring through the risk management arrangements. We also have an annual counter fraud plan, which is a living document and identifies emerging fraud risks as we go forward. We also work closely with the internal audit provision via SWOP in identifying a baseline fraud risk assessments. And this assurance work involves a review of systems and procedures and involving a review of management of risk and where system vulnerabilities are brought to the attention of management, recommendations to strengthen systems and procedures are taken forward. We also identify through management reports highlighting management issues, fraud risk control weaknesses and recommendations, and we update new policies and implement new policies where applicable. Management teams within service areas also consider critical risks to their service provision. Service areas take this opportunity to consider control environment rather than the specific individual controls and measures that they can take forward to mitigate against these risks. Move on to the next slide, please, Jane. Around delivery. The anti-fraud team work on a risk-based assurance approach, and they constantly review incoming fraud referrals, which informs patterns and how these fraud risks affect specific service areas. The council continues to seek to make the best use of data analytics and data matching to flag potential indicators of fraud risk and provide a valuable tool in tackling potential risk areas. We also constantly review ongoing emerging fraud risks, and we are proactive around anti-corruption activities via our fraud strategies and reactive work with regards to our investigations. Moving on to collaborative working. Good intelligence is crucial in order to identify fraudulent activities and take action to prevent the council falling victim. A range of data sharing both in-house and externally, along with joint working with membership around national anti-fraud networks, provides the council with a legal gateway to wide range of information providers, best practice and legislation updates. It also enables the sharing of fraud intelligence and bulletins of local and national interest, which potentially affects the organisation. Sharing of intelligence best practice with other local authorities through the Wales Fraud Investigation Group, which meets regularly to discuss current work and associated risks, trends and emerging fraud risks developing across Wales and wider. We also work closely through partnership working with the DWP, police, HMRC, NHS and health board trusts. Also via CIFAS, we have monthly national threat notification, which we then share via our various networks. Moving on to the next slide, please, Jane. A key to addressing fraud risk is raising awareness. And we've done this via strengthening our staff code of conduct, which has been reviewed and now includes reference to anti-fraud items. Also, a declaration of interest policy has been updated and have been approved, again strengthening fraud awareness and financial fraud. Most recently, we've launched our corporate mandatory fraud awareness training, which is mandatory for all staff to be completed by the end of March 2024, and raising this awareness to all other wider groups, including schools around the area's head session on the 21st of February and the governing body briefing session held only this week. We also have developed our reporting of concerns and suspicious behaviour. We've got active communication channels across the organisation, and there has been a report fraud button accessible for all employees that are able to identify and report suspected fraud. That concludes the presentation. Chair, as I say, Yvette and the team are available for any comments from the group committee. I'm happy to take questions as they come forward.
Thank you very much, Craig. That's a really, really helpful run through. And really pleased that we've got the fraud button back up, because we talked about that before. Questions, colleagues? Councillor Pete.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks for that as well, Craig. Just a quick little comment. I think it was on the background slide, Craig. I think you talked about inflation and interest rates there being high. I just wondered if we should also have a bullet in there about above inflation increases in council tax that may lead towards fraud and people not being able to pay.
I think in terms of, you know, we've got it covered there in terms of soaring inflation and higher interest rates. Council tax does have an impact on our residents, as we know, and we do fully assess that impact. And it's a key part of council's consideration when they're actually setting the budget as well. It is a very careful balance, isn't it, in terms of the level of increase that we levy across our residents to support the costs of the council, whilst ensuring that we maintain an appropriate level of service for those that need it. And that includes, of course, our schools, all of the council services, everything there. And we ourselves are impacted heavily by inflation and those soaring costs as well. So it is a very careful balance, and it is something that we carefully consider. And of course, it is a key consideration in that overarching principle that you see here as well.
Thank you, Jane. Thank you, Craig. Thanks, Councillor Peat, for your question. Question from me, Craig. Does any benchmarking get undertaken across local authorities in Wales on fraud, you know, amounts of money lost through fraud, the types of fraud? You know, is there a kind of, to put it a bit crudely, is there a kind of benchmark ranking of how different local authorities perform in the fraud avoidance space? Is there any data or any benchmarking, any comparisons?
I haven't seen any benchmark in that regard. Yvette, is there anything that you've got with your working groups across local authorities that bring that information available?
In essence, no. The working groups talk specifically about emerging threats, current work and that sort of thing, and what's being lost. The Cabinet Office do a measure, as do those of us that complete the SIPFA counter fraud tracker that comes around as well. So I don't know whether Audit Wales would actually pick up and report on a whole of Wales thing to show what's being lost and to where and such like, or whether maybe that would be a useful suggestion that something could be created to have a look at that. I mean, we look at the national pictures on particular things, whether it's tenancy fraud or blue badge fraud and those kinds of things. But it would, I do agree, I think it would be helpful to have something that is a Wales-centric based thing.
I can see Emma's got her hand up, Emma from Audit Wales.
Yeah, sure, Chair. I was just going to say Audit Wales do a biannual report on the NFI, because obviously we've got access to the NFI data, but we wouldn't have every fraud element. So we do publish that. And I may get the date wrong, but I think the last one we did was in May 2023. It was certainly last year. We don't, in that we sort of do a wholesale Wales approach, though, rather than naming and shaming, if you like, authorities that aren't as good as others. But we have got that information internally. If you wanted to know, are you in the top quartile, the bottom quartile for identifying fraud, etc., as a result of checking the NFI matches.
Thanks, Emma. Yeah, that's the sort of thing I was interested in, and not to be punitive, but to make sure that lessons are being learned across authorities where they can, to ultimately protect the public purse as best it can be. Any other questions from members? There don't seem to be any other questions, but I can see that Yvette would like to come in. Are you on mute, Yvette?
Sorry, I had to do it, didn't I? I just wanted to say really that the measurement, I mean, Emma's just kindly said about the NFI, which is the Cabinet Office, which refers to the measurement of successes throughout matches that the councils complete every year. I mean, for me, that leaves an enormous gap, which I think is worth mentioning, because they are matches that are obviously sent to each council, which is a measurement, but there is so much more that we get in as direct referrals, that we deliver as proactive with review work and all sorts of our own internal data matching and additional work. So there is that, the Cabinet Office, the NFI matches, the National Fraud Initiative matches are one small element. And the difficulty with those, and I will say this, is that a lot of them are so outdated. You know, the data that they match is so dated by the time we get it that things have moved on. So, which is part of the reason why my team carry out these rolling proactive reviews, so that we use live data and we're moving it all the time, so that we try and catch things as soon as we can, not waiting for a year or 2 years before we have you know, those matches come through. I mean, if we sit and wait for those matches, then we're not doing our job properly. You know, we have to be proactive. We have to be horizon scanning all the time and looking at what's happening outside of Powys, outside of Wales even, and see, you know, and work with all these other groups and knowledge hubs to make sure that we're really thinking about protecting ourselves before it hits us. That's all I wanted to say, really. Thank you, Chair.
Well, thanks very much, Yvette. Thank you. John, and this will be the final question on this item, please. John. John, are you on mute maybe?
Yeah, so I do apologise. I've recently completed my own fraud training, and one thing struck me is there was a page there which I took a screenshot of, what we do in Powys. And one of the things that we said is, or you said, was separation and rotation of duties of individuals. That's not something I was familiar with. Is that common practice, and are we satisfied that we're doing sufficient amount of that?
Thank you, Councillor John.
I'm not a councillor, don't promote me.
Oh, sorry, yeah, sorry. don't put something on you don't wish for. All I can say is that in every investigation, I'm sure Jane will come in a minute, in every investigation or case that we look at, if we find that there isn't that happening, then we raise that very quickly as a heightened risk and look at, you know, whether there can be remedial action or controls put into that to make sure that that does happen. But I'm sure Jane will give you a much broader picture and probably has more knowledge than I do, other than just the direct fraud stuff that we're involved with. Thank you.
Jane?
Yeah, I wanted to mention something else, but I think that is a really key factor and something that is more difficult to achieve as our resources reduce.
Yes, exactly.
We all know the financial pressure the council is under and how that is going to impact on the whole organisation. The internal controls from inside the organisation, because of course, when we're talking about fraud, this isn't all about council staff. I don't want anybody to be under any illusion that all those investigations relate to council staff. They do not. They are very limited in terms of those, but this is the wider fraud across council tax, across benefits and across business. You know, it's much broader than council staff themselves. But in terms of council staff, the internal controls that are reviewed as part of the work of our internal audit team is absolutely fundamental to ensuring that those controls are in place across the organisation. So I think probably where we can, we rotate those duties, but that's not always possible. But ensuring that we protect the council, but obviously also our members of staff from any, you know, undue allegations or whatever, we have to make sure that those systems are robust, and you get that assurance as a committee through the internal audit opinion, the coverage of the work that you see and all of the reports that you get. So I think we do have a good level of assurance there. I think what I wanted just to mention was not all councils have a fraud team like we do here in Powys. It is a small team. I am always very pleased with the work of the team. We have a really good team, and that is often recognised across the rest of Wales, where we're asked to support other authorities, and that's down to Yvette and the work of the team, which yeah, it's really good. And I just wanted to put that on record if I could, Chair.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for putting that on the record, because we do recognise the strength of our small team. Yeah, absolutely. So thank you very much, Craig and Yvette and Jane, for that risk deep dive. It's such an important place, and I just, you know, reminder on where everyone's supposed to do their fraud training, and that includes us as members by the end of March. So I'll move us on to agenda item 14, which is just verbal updates on each of the existing working groups. So I'll just take Chair's prerogative and work from the bottom up on the internal audit working group. As Dave said earlier, from a swap perspective, we had a really good session on their new dashboard last week, and as we've discussed in this meeting, we're going to explore the supplementary payments internal audit report in more detail through the working group. And that was one of the purposes of the working group, was to look at internal audit reports where there are limited assurance, so that we can have those more detailed discussions. But that's about it for the internal audit working group for the time being. I'll go to Gareth on capital, and then I'll ask John to cover both HTR and HOUPS.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, last week we had a meeting to discuss the first draft of a final report. And this was a very wide-ranging and constructive discussion. We had a lot of input from officers right across the council. Kath has taken, I think, half a dozen pages of notes of that, which I'm going to translate over the weekend and put into a draft final report, which we agreed we deal with through correspondence, and there wouldn't be any need for a further meeting. So in the next couple of weeks, that will come to the full group.
Splendid. Thanks very much, Gareth. Thank you. John?
Just unmuting. Yes, thank you, Chair. I had the pleasure of presenting 2 reports to Cabinet this week, one on HOUPS and one on HTR. We've had favourable feedback from them formally on the HOUPS report, which has been accepted and put into the archive. The HTR, I believe, was well received as well. And I'm expecting a favourable feedback from Cabinet shortly.
Thank you very much, John. Does anyone have any questions for myself or John or Gareth? No. In that case, I'll move us on to item 15, sorry, our work programme. Anyone? Yeah, I'm quite pleased, I have to say, with how the work programme is shaping up. Thanks to Connor and Kath for their support on that. Pete, Councillor Pete, I can see that you've got a question, a comment or a question.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just a quick comment. I just wondered if we could add in there review of annual report on whistleblowing statistics.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, because that is one of the things that we've got there, is sort of all of our regular annual responsibilities. So to receive whistleblowing report on an annual basis, perhaps alongside the complaints report, would be helpful. So we can, Kath, I'm sure, will make that update.
Yes, Chair.
Anything else? Thanks, Kath. Anything else on the work programme? No, it would seem not. In which case, Kath, I think we can move to item 16, which asks the committee to resolve to exclude members of the public so that we can conduct an exempt item in private session. So are members content to resolve to exclude the public from item 17, the regulatory tracker?
Chair, sorry to interrupt. Can I have a proposer and a seconder for the motion, please?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. I think everyone is content. We have a seconder, we have a proposer and a seconder, and everyone seems to be content. So Kath, could you please make the arrangements